Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Creator Circle. I'm your host, Lucy, and today we are here with special guest, Susan. It's very awkward for me to call her Susan because she's actually my mom. But
Hi
yes, for the
there.
sake of introductions, we'll call her Susan for now. But she is a creator of all kinds. She's not only an artist, she likes to paint and draw, but she's also a gardener, a great chef. She takes pieces of furniture and things that people are throwing away, and she literally refurbishes them and turns them into beautiful new pieces. So she's all kinds of creative, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So without further ado, I introduce Susan.
Hi there.
Hello. I, as you know, have some questions prepared, so I guess we'll just jump on in. And these are sort of just go with the flow, so there's no particular order. So yeah, to get
Okay.
started, let's go with this one. So you've been to and lived in a number of different places. Which place or places do you think most influence the kind of food you make now, or maybe even just the kind of art that you do or the style that you pursue?
Well, so far as food goes, I think that I take an influence from every place, even places I haven't been, but food that I like. But before I could really start working on my own style with cooking, I really wanted to have a good core understanding of, the mother of all foods, French cuisine, the one that gives us everything that we can build on. So that and Italian cuisine, I think they go hand in hand. So I really wanted to have a core fundamental understanding of those two base cuisines before I started trying to put in my own flair or flavor, if you will.
Right. So then now what do you think is your kind of flair? What do you add to it that might be a little bit different?
I think that one of the things that I do well certainly isn't unique to me, but I like to combine cultures. I like to take something, let's say, from Vietnamese cuisine and maybe something from Mexican cuisine and French cuisine and bring them together in ways that maybe you wouldn't have thought of, or being able to introduce flavors in a way that isn't necessarily traditional.
Yeah. And so have you ever been or lived somewhere where I guess, you mentioned French and Italian, which I feel like is kind of well known, but have you ever been or lived somewhere where the cuisine was lesser well known that you felt like should be a bigger thing in the rest of the world? Like the rest of the world needs to know this. Why isn't it out there?
I kind of find that all the time. When you taste something and it's like the most delicious thing you've ever had,
Mm-hmm.
and at that moment, I want everyone to know that flavor and to be able to appreciate it. I have to say this: we are now in 2023, and people have the benefit of the world being much smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is that you can find things from Vietnam, from El Salvador, from Nicaragua, wherever you want to find something from. You can look on the internet and you can have it shipped to your house next day. So I think in that respect, it's more about people wanting to find different things. But a long time ago, before the internet was around, my being in Guatemala or someplace like that doesn't have a world renowned cuisine. So, things that I took away from that experience, one was agua de Jamaica, or the drink that's made from hibiscus flowers. So that flavor is one that I immediately brought back with me. and I wanted people to experience. So it's a traditional drink, like you would have juice, or in the United States, you'd have a soft drink. Well, this is one of those things that's traditional in Guatemala for that. And it's basically a tea made out of dried hibiscus flowers and sugar. It's delicious and refreshing and a little bit sour. And so I've used that in sauces. I've used it in all different kinds of things where you wouldn't expect it.
And so this is more of an opinion question, but you mentioned that you like to kind of combine different flavors, different cultures into, and that's kind of your style of cooking. Have you ever seen, especially on the internet now where they make all these cooking videos and things like that, have you ever seen somebody do some sort of fusion dish that you're just like, oh no, why would you ever do that?
Yes. Yes, often. There's a couple things that I find. One is I sometimes I think people are trying so hard to be creative that they try to reinvent the wheel, or they try to fix something that's not broken. Mm-hmm. An example of that would be a Caesar salad. Mm-hmm. Well, a Caesar salad, as we know, is romaine lettuce, the Caesar dressing, which traditionally is made tableside, and maybe some croutons. That's it. Now, when people try to take out the eggs, the anchovies, well, or, put sour cream in it, well, that's not a Caesar dressing. That's making something totally different, right. Which is fine. That's great. But you can't have romaine lettuce, put ranch dressing on it, and call it a Caesar salad, if that makes sense at all. No, so some things, I think you can take a Caesar salad and add to it. Maybe, you could do, in fall, you could do roasted root vegetables tossed in a traditional Caesar dressing. Couldn't call that a Caesar salad. However, you could, use those flavors and do something for fall that's different. Yeah. People in an attempt to be creative, and wanting to explore, I think that generally the reason they're doing it is pure and wonderful. They'll add so many different things that you can't really find the flavor in any of them, and I think we get lost with that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very important to understand the flavors that you're trying to bring together, right? So that they do work and not get lost, not get muddied.
Right. And I kind of had this question later, but I'll bring it up now, which was, you mentioned that in an attempt to be creative, they kind of, they're doing too much. And that makes me wonder, do you think that a formal education, or maybe not even a formal, but just like being in a kitchen and learning kind of the traditional cuisines, like you mentioned, and having that backbone is really integral to then becoming like a great chef? Or even if we talk about art, having an education of art and all of the different techniques and everything like that. Do you think that that's integral to being creative, or being a chef, or being an artist? Or do you think that you can just become that
well, I think let's talk about being a chef first. Mm-hmm. The base for all great cuisine starts with science and math. Mm-hmm. So if you don't understand the science and math behind making, say, a beurre blanc, then one time you'll make it and it'll work, and the next time it won't, and you won't know why. Mm-hmm. So I definitely think that you need to have an understanding of these things, or it simply won't work. You won't know why that your sauce is breaking, for example. So yes, I think that once you understand the science and math, then you can manipulate it any way you want to. Now, whether you will be successful in being able to combine flavors that work well together, well, that remains to be seen. And again, taste is subjective. So what works really well for one person may not work well for the next. But there are certain things that I think, on the whole, can say work well. Vanilla ice cream, for example. Yeah. That creamy, rich, sweet, it's wonderful. May not be your favorite, but however, you can't say that, oh, that's just horrible. I mean, if it's made well, it's great. Mm-hmm. So, it just, the science and math is, you absolutely have to have an understanding of that. Now, you don't have to get that at school. You can certainly get that in the kitchen. My most favorite thing about being a chef is that the knowledge is limitless. Right. You can learn from absolutely everyone. If you want to, if you keep your eyes and ears open, you will learn and get ideas that you had never even thought of. I mean, that to me is the most exciting thing.
Right. No, definitely. I think keeping an open mind in just about anything that you do is important. But I like that you mentioned cooking in particular, because everybody has a different perspective, and everybody, even though everybody comes from a particular culture to some extent, each family and each individual has their own spin on things. And so it's always fun to hear how their different takes on, maybe it's something traditional or something cultural, and how you can, impact that in your own way.
Exactly. If you said, you have a culture, but then even smaller than that, you have your, family unit. And most families have food traditions, or, something that they've always had it this way. And so when we grow up and those things are, say, special for your family, it's a celebration food or something, then as you get older, you bring that with you. And even though, let's say, it may not be the best tuna casserole if it were to be in a competition, however, for you, it's the best. Mm-hmm. And your friend's family they had their version, and for them, it's the best. And so the wonderful thing is being able to see the parts of your family's tuna casserole that you think would be great to take away, and then learning about your friends and then maybe your neighbors, and being able to take all those components and put them together to make something that's just not your neighbors, not your mom's, but yours, and really unique and wonderful.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree. And so when I initially asked, I was asking about cooking, but also, with art, there are many different techniques and different things that you need, or if you were to go to art school, that they would want to teach you, line, balance, the color spectrum wheel, whatever. I'm obviously did not study art. But do you think that those things are really fundamental to pursuing art? Or do you think similarly, like, you don't have to have that formal education, but you can learn as you go? Or is art something a little bit different where you can kind of make it up?
Well, I think it really depends on, what I don't think you can just start out making intaglio printmaking without a little bit of education to back you up. Mm-hmm. I don't, think that anybody knows how to batik cloth just innately. Yeah. So it really depends on what you want to do. What I took away from my art classes in college, that my initial thing was, they can't teach you how to draw, or that's not even what they're trying to do. They're teaching you how to see and how to take what you see and put it down on paper. Because what I found is that what the majority of us start out doing is we're not really trying to capture what we see. We are trying to capture what we think we see. And it's kind of a trick our minds playing on ourselves, because, if somebody's in profile, that they have another eye over here, they have another part of their nose, they have cheek, everything. And so initially, you start putting those things down on paper, even though you can't really see them, but your mind is playing a trick on you. So I think, one thing is they are great at teaching you to draw what you actually see, or to capture what you actually see. So those things I think are very important. I don't think you need a formal education, but I do think that there's a lot of benefit in, learning about the nuance of color and structure, and those things. I think a formal education can help, but obviously there are people that certainly don't need it. They just have that ability. So I think it's beneficial to anyone. But I think education in any form is beneficial to anybody. Even, I just think, and I mean that still, like we were talking about cooking, that you can learn from anybody. I think same thing with painting or drawing or sculpture. You can learn from anybody. It's whether or not you want to.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's an interesting perspective, something that I had never thought about before, this idea that they're not necessarily teaching you how to draw or to be an artist, but to really put down what you see, as opposed to what your mom is telling you or what you innately would assume is there. And so that's an interesting perspective that I hadn't considered before. And just because you're my mom and in conversation, you've mentioned before that ever since you were little, you always wanted to be an artist. And do you think that passion for art and creativity is what led you to cooking and being a chef, or did you always enjoy that as well?
I think that absolutely it's what led me to being a chef. Although I really did always love food and love cooking. But, when I was studying, I was in college, and I kind of had a revelation that, I am not a fan of starving, and, I'm not great at that, and I don't necessarily want to try. So I was very, very lucky in that I was living in Shreveport, Louisiana, and I was waiting tables at a restaurant, very good restaurant, and the chef lost his sous chef. He needed a new sous chef. The executive chef's name was Ronaldo, great chef. And so I'm sticking up my hand going, I can do it. I want to be your sous chef. And I think his exact words were, little girl, you know nothing. And anyway, he ended up giving me a chance. In that, I have to say, I've spent a couple of years learning from him and just kind of being a sponge. And so, that was just a godsend. It was, really ignited my passion. And I had somebody who was just a fantastic teacher. And I've had other chefs since then that, I worked underneath. That one thing, if you're trying to come up in a kitchen, a lot of people will change restaurants. Seems like maybe often, but it's, depends on when you've exhausted what you think you can really learn from that position and that experience, then you move on.
Mhm.
And it's not a bad thing. It's, it's you're trying to gain as much knowledge as possible so that you can find your footing and really find your voice. So I've had the benefit of working under some really incredible chefs who uh, gave me the ability to learn and to start finding my voice. And they gave me the chance to fail, which is very important. You learn a whole lot more from your mistakes than you do from the things that work out really well.
Right. And then I think that that's like industry agnostic. If you're in a career to learn and you want to be an expert at what you do and really good at it, each different experience is a learning experience. And if your time is up there, your time is up there, and on to the next learning experience for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's just a good life tip in general.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. So I mentioned briefly when I was introducing you that you are sort of, multidisciplinary. You paint, you draw, you're a chef, you just do all kinds of different things. With regard to art in particular, do you have a favorite medium, or do you like to change it up? What's your take on that?
I don't have a favorite medium. It really depends on what I'm trying to do. The vast majority of things will start out either, if I have a painting in mind that I want to do, it starts out as a drawing. And that may just be pencil drawing. For paintings, I have a little bit of a process, generally, not always, that I will start with a drawing, then I'll block in color with markers or Conte crayons or something, and then I'll move on to the painting. But I love drawing with art markers, especially with gray tones, just, all warm grays or all cool grays. And then I love using lots of color. So it kind of just depends on what I'm thinking of doing.
And so do you have a medium that you're most comfortable in, or do you think, at this point, you're kind of just comfortable in all of them?
I'm most comfortable with painting, or with painting with acrylics mostly. I do enjoy watercolors. That's not something I generally share with others, though. Those tend to be for myself. So, and then I love drawing with both markers, pens, pencils. So all of those I'm equally comfortable with.
Yeah, very cool. So, and this one is kind of a different type of question, but I was talking to somebody once who studied art in college and had a professor that said, and I'm paraphrasing, I wasn't there, I don't know the exact words, but he said something along the lines of, don't ever become a mom, because once you become a mom, you'll be happy and you'll no longer create art. I guess alluding to this idea that art comes from a place of, sadness or longing, or just, something other than happiness, obviously. And so what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree? I'm not really sure that I would necessarily agree, but I want to know your opinion.
Well, you did send me the questions that you might or might not ask beforehand, and this was definitely my favorite question. And I could probably spend hours and hours answering this, because I don't believe that people are motivated to write great songs, wonderful poems, great books, beautiful paintings from a place of ultimate happiness. No, I don't. I
Right.
think that the tortured soul has much more to say than somebody who's, got rainbows and lollipops. That being said, I don't. If I was 30 years younger, I would tell you that no great art comes from a place of happiness. Well, that's my view on that has changed.
Mhm.
A lot, and a lot of that has to do with becoming a mom, but oddly, but I, I think that the need to create, the need, and that could be the written word, sing, any area, comes from a need to share, engage, and truly expose ourselves and hopefully others to us. And when I say expose, I don't mean flash. I mean,
Yes.
our souls, our deepest thoughts, desires, and you need to do that when it's not easy, when what you need to impart, what you're trying to share, isn't look at how pretty the rainbow is or the puppy. Now, that's not to say that rainbows and puppies aren't wonderful things. They absolutely are.
Right.
But it's very easy to see how cute the puppy is. It takes no real depth of thought. It's puppy's there. You can't deny how cute it is, right? So the trickier things, the things that are hard to discuss, the things that make us uncomfortable or scared, or those things, we those things are why great songs have been written, why, and it may be, when you see just a beautiful painting, it's just showing beauty to you. But what's behind that beauty? It's, if you, let's say you look at a painting of a mother and child, but newborn child, and obviously it's a beautiful moment. But then if you look closer, you can see maybe in the mother's eyes the fear. She can do this. You can see the longing to know more, to be able, to do this, to maybe have help with her that she's lacking, or all these things. If you look at something simply on its base value, it may be simple, but the artist hopefully has been able to impart this emotion, this, that obviously it's taking me hundreds of words to impart, and hopefully you could gain that just by looking at the painting. So, right. Yes, I definitely agree with that, Professor. It's, but I agree and disagree. That I don't think that having a child is the end, because I don't think that our world, our realm is erased from all fear or conflict or turmoil just because we bring a little ball of sunshine into it. We are completely blessed and lucky, as I was. You had no issues when you were born. You were incredibly healthy. We had enough money and food. you had access to clean water. You had, there wasn't a war going on outside our door. So we were very blessed, but vast majority of people aren't as lucky as I've been. So, and honestly, I remember looking at you when you were very little, and I just had a huge amount of fear that I couldn't do it. And so those would be things that I would want to express. So I think, yeah, I just don't think that having a child ends all the turmoil, though. So.
Right. And, now that I think about it, it's interesting because the idea is that people have had a life up until the point that they had a child, and before that they had to live through something, and that doesn't mean that that's gone just now that the child is there. Even if they're not in that situation anymore, they might still have feelings for how that moment or that situation made them feel, and so they could still create based on that. Does that make sense?
It does, but I think it's a really huge misconception by just about everybody that if you're an adult when you have a child, and that you've basically got things figured out when you have a child. Wrong. Wrong. I continue to recognize how much I just have no idea about. What I just don't know becomes more and more apparent every day, which is great. But I think it's really a huge misconception that at the age of 25 or 30 or 35 or 40, we have things figured out.
Right.
I don't think many of us do.
I don't think any of us ever do, right?
Well, I think it's funny, people that can stand up and say, "Oh, I've got everything figured out. I know exactly." Yeah, don't trust that person.
Yeah. And so have you ever gone through, I think about it's mostly when I think about this, I think about writers and how the term of writer's block. But do you ever go through periods of like crazy inspiration where you're constantly creating? And then vice versa on the other side, have you ever experienced artist block or periods of inactivity? And do you have anything that you can maybe relate to that? Why you were having a period of inactivity?
Absolutely, absolutely. And unfortunately for me, when I have artist block, it doesn't mean that I don't have ideas. It just means that I cannot bring them to fruition, which is so frustrating. So yeah, I found that when this occurs, I have to figure out what it is that it is really at the core, what is fundamentally upsetting me or upsetting the apple cart, so that I can't express myself in the ways that I want to, before I will be able to do. I can't draw a straight line when this happens. And if I wanted to draw a wavy line, they'd be poker straight. So yeah, it's right. Very, very frustrating.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned that you have to figure out at the core what's causing the problem. I don't think many people take that perspective. I think they take it as, okay, now's just not the time and I'll come back to it later, versus trying to solve the problem and facing it head on to actually be able to overcome it.
I can only say that now because I've spent so long doing exactly that, going, oh, well, it's just shake it off. It'll, I'm just going to put this to the side right now and I'll come back to it tomorrow and things will be fine. No, never is. And even if I can, let's say, put out a painting the next day or something. It's just really at the heart of it, not good, or not what I wanted it to be. Even if I can come up with something that's passable, it doesn't have the depth, the emotion that I really wanted it to have. It's because I haven't really dealt with, what is truly, upsetting me or blocking me.
Right. Yeah. And I just think that's something that everybody should consider. I mean, like you said, you spent so much time avoiding that or not doing that. And imagine if we had all just, you know, approach the problem head on, and what that might do for us to.
Well, that's the thing. That's being a human being. We all, like we were saying, and this goes back to the professor, you won't create art after having a child. But a whole lot of the human experience is, trying to deny or ignore, the problems within ourselves, the things that are upsetting, within us. We all try to avoid it, sweep it under the rug, pretend it doesn't exist. Denial, denial, denial. Well,
Right.
at the end of the day, that doesn't fix anything or help anything. So,
Right. Yeah. I agree that that's probably just a fact of human nature, but to your point, there's definitely a benefit to attempting. Not that we're perfect, not that we can always get it right, but definitely
at
something.
least, yeah, at least trying.
Right. And so, do you have anything in particular that inspires you the most, or um, what inspires you the most? What do you believe inspires you the most?
What inspires me the most is compassion, empathy, real love. And I don't mean like romantic love, I mean love between any people, sister, mother, whatever.
Hmm.
I think that those things, when you see real compassion exchanged between people, between strangers, when
Right.
you see empathy, when I see those occurring in life, it makes me want to strive to be a better person, to be able to show compassion and empathy, and makes me want to understand the strife, the turmoil, the hate. Um, Obviously, I'll never understand hate, but to try to understand the mindset of people involved, really inspire me. The human condition, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I think it's interesting what you mentioned, that, you'll never truly understand per se somebody's hate, but this idea that everybody has a different perspective. And I've alluded to it in previous episodes, but even if we have very similar lifestyles, our eyes and our perception of the world around us are very different. And so to take into perspective what somebody else considers what's going on in the moment, or what might be the problem, um, opens your eyes to what else might be going on in a situation, as opposed to just, the way that you see it based on your life up until that point. And so I think that bringing or being open to hearing other people out and seeing their perspective also gives light to empathy and sympathy and compassion and those kind of things, because it puts them into perspective and you can see them on a different level, as opposed to just, let's say we're in an argument, in a particular moment you're just angry and you're just two angry people, versus if you boil it down to, okay, what's the cause of this and why do you feel this way, now you're a human being and I can relate to you on a different level.
Absolutely, and I think it's very important to remember that if there are four people in a conversation, every person's view, every person's reality, every person's feelings are valid.
Right.
Mine are no more valid than yours. And I think at the bottom of a lot of things, people forget that or ignore it. That, you know, my feelings or desires are certainly no more important than Bob's, or, you know, there is no person deserves more out of life, who deserves to thrive more than anyone else. And I truly believe that, you know, why are we here? And I think that we're here to help ensure that people we come in contact with have the ability to thrive. I think that we should want nothing less than everyone around us, people we don't know, people we know, friends, family, people we don't get along with. They should all have the ability to thrive and grow, and I think that's what we're here for. So, you know, that's what inspires me, you know.
Yeah, I think that's very unique. I think honestly in today's world it's so comforting to finally hear somebody that wants other people to do well and to succeed, as opposed to cheering yourself on. Not that you shouldn't encourage and, you know, pursue your own passions and do your own thing, but, you know, we're all humans at the end of the day, and we should all want each other to do the best that we can. So
Absolutely. You know, the thing is that in any society, if everyone is thriving, it only benefits everyone else. I mean, you know, education, that needs to be for everybody, because it just helps everyone, you know, yeah, have a better understanding. And you know, it's, for me, it's not about, I don't paint or draw or drag home broken furniture, just to put out pretty pictures or that. When I find a piece of furniture on a corner, I get the benefit of being able to look up the company that made it and look up the time period that it was made. And I get an understanding, or maybe a glimpse into people and a time that I wouldn't have been able to before, and opens my eyes to things that I was unaware of. So,
and to that point, that actually brings up another question. So when you find these pieces of furniture, or sometimes like windows or glass and things like that, do you know in the moment what you're going to do with it? Do you have to take it home? Are you automatically inspired? What is the process there? Are you just like, I need that in my life and I'll figure it out later? Or
well, so you mentioned windows.
mm-hmm.
I'm very lucky that I live in St. Louis, and unlike Houston, we don't tear down our buildings when they get a little bit older. We keep them and we prop them back up. And so I have found that the original windows are what I like to paint on the most. I very rarely use canvas anymore. Mm-hmm. When I'll find these windows that have been taken out of the houses, maybe 100 years old, 150 years old. Mm-hmm. And so I've kind of come up with this technique where if I was using a canvas, well, I just have that one side to paint on. Well, if I have glass, then I can put the painting on the front of the glass that would have been on the front of the canvas, but then I also have the back of the glass that I can paint on also. So it gives it much more depth.
Right.
I've found. Now, other things that I see, sometimes I'll see them and I know immediately what I want to do. very rarely does it actually come out exactly like that, because usually what happens is the piece will start to talk to me while I'm doing it. So it'll tell me, no, let's go this way or this way. Other times I'll see something and it's just maybe its shape or the way it plays in the negative space that really inspires me. And I may have no idea what I'm going to do with it, or maybe even what it is, but I know that I need it for some reason.
Right.
And that, you know, it'll explain itself or become apparent to me later. Most things I have, furniture wise, most things I have somewhat of an idea.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
Right. No, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that it kind of speaks to you as you start. And I think Tomas sort of alluded to that when we were talking to him earlier, that as he's making a film, obviously he has a plan for it, but as you go, you kind of get lost in the story, and in your case, in the art, and that might change the trajectory of where you initially thought you were going to go. And sometimes that's for the best. Like if we were to always stick to that, no, this is what I had planned, we would never see that spontaneous in the moment idea come to fruition. So I think it's important to follow those moments of just like, okay, I think I need to change where I'm heading with this.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I don't think that rigidity is ever a benefit to the creative process. I think that you know need to get those sparks of inspiration whenever they come, and you know trust that you got that inspiration or that spark for a reason.
Right.
I think that any creative process is, you know, a flowing kind of, you know, undulating process in our minds and what we're putting out, and we need to follow all the different little tributaries or whatever that, you know, take us this direction and that direction to see where it leads.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so in creating, obviously, you know, I'm just one person, so I can only speak to my experience, but you, like I mentioned before, you work in art, you're a chef, you garden, all of these things. Do these different activities, do they evoke the same feelings for you as you do them? And like if you're in the middle of a painting versus if you're in the middle of preparing a special dish or something, or do they evoke different feelings? And if so, how are they different?
Base level, they evoke the same. Um, you know, I love the creative process. I love to be able to explore and you know see new things to see how they'll work together. Um, but after that, with food, um, it I love to cook for people. It makes me. I hopefully I can make them happy, even for a small period of time, a very small period of time. This will just be wonderful and it'll be relaxing, or it'll take them back to someplace else, or any of that. Cooking for me is like a gift. Um, so I always cook with other people in mind. I always want to make other people comforted by food.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you know, really something that I really like to do. It's a good way for me to share with other people. Art, I think, is generally, for me, a deeper form of expression. Maybe, you know, other things I'm trying to express. And then gardening, I think it's really important that each and every person get their hands in the earth every day,
Mm-hmm.
just to become grounded, to connect yourself with the world, the natural world around you. And I don't mean you have to get up to your elbows and be, covered. I just truly spend a minute and a half listening to the wind, feeling the earth. I think it really centers and really unites us with all the energy around us, because at the end of the day, that's all we are, is energy.
Mhm.
And how we relate, and it's very important, and it's at the core of everything.
Right. And so you kind of alluded to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you prefer, and so in what you literally said was that you like to cook for other people and that you have other people in mind. But when you're creating art, you're painting or, changing up the furniture that you find or whatever, do you prefer to create it for yourself or for others? And when working on a specific piece, do you have an end user in mind or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. A lot of times I do. But that's interesting, because I may have an end user in mind, but that certainly doesn't mean that they'll ever see it.
Interesting.
Or even if they do, I will not necessarily let them know that I had them in mind.
Hmm.
Because so when I'm painting, whatever I'm painting, I have my emotions about it, my thoughts about it, my feelings.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean that you or anybody else it'll evoke the same emotion for you or somebody else.
Hmm.
And it's not important that it evokes the same emotion.
Hmm.
If you feel anything, then I feel like that's a bonus, and that's wonderful, because you can take that, let's say, to a film. Well, one part of a film may make me cry,
Hmm.
and it wouldn't make you cry at all. You may not understand that, but you feel a sense of warmth or camaraderie at that same portion of the film. That's great. That's wonderful. It evoked feeling. That's all that's important in my eyes. It doesn't need to be the same. So I do have people in mind. But like I said, I don't necessarily tell them.
Yeah. So what I take from that is that you don't want to influence their perception of it. You want them to feel whatever they feel from it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, that is all of the questions I had. I think we had a pretty great conversation. Thank you again for joining me. And
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
remember that episodes drop weekly on Wednesday, so stick around next week for another episode. Thanks.
Thank you so much.